This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde.
Normally, Allan Walsh being in studio would be a cause for celebration for us at SDPN because, you know, we rarely get to be in studio together. I think maybe once or twice a year, Allan. But unfortunately, last night, we heard the news about the tragic passing of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew Gaudreau. And I think we need to start there because it's been a really rough 12 hours for the hockey community. What's been your experience with that?
Well, obviously everybody is devastated. It's an unspeakable tragedy. What happened is just unimaginable. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes in life there is tragedy without reason. And this is one of those circumstances where it cannot be explained. You can't rationalize it. The entire hockey world right now is in mourning. And I spoke to some clients last night, clients who played in Columbus or played in Calgary with Johnny. My heart goes out to the Gaudreau family on the loss of two sons, mm-hmm. and you know, father and brother, and it's just, there are no words to describe the pain that people are feeling today.
You know, Johnny's story is one that we love in hockey because it's an underdog story. There's a great anecdote about him showing up to training camp his first year in Calgary, and the security wouldn't let him in because they said they thought he was a crazed fan because he was 5'9" and showing up with a hockey bag, and like, you're not an NHL player. And, you know, this is a guy who won the Hobey Baker, was a standout in college, but was not drafted high and not expected to do what he was able to do. What do you think his legacy, and also, I guess, putting South Jersey also on the map in terms of a great hockey area, what do you think his legacy will be in this game?
Well, I think he's going to be remembered as an incredible hockey player and somebody who overcame a lot of odds, had a real confidence in himself. Mm-hmm. I was doing some reading today about some of the statements, some of the interviews he did, and he talked about his first NHL camp in Calgary after being drafted and feeling like he wanted to go up to players and ask them for their autograph.
Right.
And he said, the next camp when I was there, I felt like, hey, I can play here. And, you know, his last year in Calgary, he had 115 points. I think in his years in Calgary and in 8 years, he was an all-star 6 times. Just accomplished an incredible amount in a very short time. And I think, you know, given the news that was released today, it's still very fresh. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people have to sort their feelings out. There's going to be a lot of grieving, and certainly right now we're in a mourning period. Everything is still very fresh. I've talked to a couple of people today on the phone, and literally there are people who start bursting into tears and sobbing on the phone. So that's what's going on today. It's just a very sad, tragic day.
And, you know, it's not easy when you're doing a show that is, you know, supposed to educate and entertain, as we're doing here, to focus on anything else. But as of the time of this recording, you know, all we know is, you know, what the reports were this morning and what the NHL released and what the Columbus Blue Jackets released. So we will leave it there because, you know, as difficult as it is to transition out of something like that, we want to say that we wish the very best, and our thoughts, prayers, and condolences to Johnny's family, to the Columbus Blue Jackets organization, and to the NHL family. And we're going to continue to do this show as planned, but we did want to say a quick word for him. So thank you for that, Allan. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a really, you know, since you arrived in Toronto, I know it's been a really tough time for you. So I appreciate you still coming in and doing the show today. And, you know, as tough of a turn as it is, you know, this is start of a really busy season for you. You know, when we talk about being an agent in the NHL, it kind of starts now, doesn't it? Right? Like the summer break is really over. Guys are starting to talk about camp. How are you feeling going into this season? It feels like it felt like last season was the first sort of normal one since COVID. Right. How are you feeling going into this one?
Well, it's interesting. You know, we're on a whirlwind from the combines to the NHL draft to free agency, and the lag time between the end of the draft and July 1 was ridiculously short. It was 48 hours. And the first week of July was a blur.
Yeah.
And by middle July, literally every single team, every GM was away.
Oh,
and if you tried to get GMs on the phone, it was on the golf course. They were in Europe with their families. They were back in their hometowns with their families. Literally nobody was working. And really there was a sense when I talked to people of exhaustion. Everybody was just totally wiped out, and they needed those couple of weeks to recharge, spend time with family. And it was around the time of the Holinka tournament where people started coming back. People started making calls on different issues, players. And by mid-August, people are back in the office and starting to lay the groundwork for the beginning of training camp. And
I know that you actually got away on vacation, but before you did that, then this is wild. You officiated a wedding.
Yeah, so a longtime client, Jan Yannick, of the Arizona Coyotes, who was traded this offseason to the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah.
Interesting side note on that. Jan had 90 plus points playing in the OHL with the Hamilton Bulldogs, and his GM was Steve Staios.
Oh, no kidding.
And Steve at one time had called Jan the best player in the OHL and one of the best players he's ever had an opportunity to have on his team. So
that's exciting.
It is. And the relationship between them, they were always very close. And I think Steve had been trying to get Jan out of the clutches of the Arizona Coyotes for a while, and was able to make a trade to get him. We signed a contract fairly quickly. And when Jan and his fiancée Jenna got engaged, they both called me and they asked me if I would honor them with officiating over their wedding. Now, I had never been asked that before. I knew nothing about it. And my first reaction was, I don't know if I could even do that. Don't you need to, be a judge or ordained minister? Mm-hmm. And started doing some research. And it is possible in the state of Arizona to get ordained as a minister online. You pay a small fee and you get an official certificate, and you are then eligible to marry people in the state of Arizona. So by the power vested in me by the state of Arizona, I was able to marry Jan and Jenna on August 10th. It was a remarkable experience standing there in the Arizona heat under an archway of floral bouquet, archway, and see them walk down the aisle, and stand with them and marry or officiate over the wedding.
Well, it speaks to, I think, the unique relationship you have. I can't imagine. I mean, I've never heard of an agent marrying their client off. It's wild.
It could be a first.
It could be. That's very cool. How did it go for you? Like, do you feel like you held up your end of the bargain? Did you remember all your lines? Like, did you feel good about it after?
So what I did is I took some time and I wrote out the different parts of the ceremony. on cue cards.
Okay.
And I had about 45 cue cards.
Oh my God.
Just to have because again, I had never done this before. I wanted it to go smoothly. It was very meaningful to me. And there are various parts of we've all been to weddings and we all know how it goes, but there's certain parts, exchanging vows and so forth where you want to get it exactly right. So I had written everything out and sat down with Jan and Jenna and kind of went over my part, their part, make sure that everybody was comfortable with what was going to be said and happy. And it went really well. It was an incredible experience.
And Arizona in August outside, how was that?
Hot. But the day before, it was scorching.
Mm-hmm.
And during the ceremony, there were actually a couple of little sprinkles. It had cooled off a little bit. It was wonderful. And I just want people to know that if anybody's looking for someone to marry them in the state of Arizona, I'm available.
That's great.
Send me an email, call the office. We can discuss fees and I'll come in and do your wedding.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's good. No, this is good. I think this is a good, it's a good side hustle for you, as if you don't have enough going on.
Exactly.
Now, obviously you just to catch up with you, you went to Europe this summer. You do your family trip.
Yeah.
And what I love about this is that, because this is our third season that we're kicking off today. I've known you for, like I said, 3 summers and you each year go on a vacation with your family, with your kids. And my question is, how many days in a row were you able to string together while on vacation without a call relating to a client or the NHL?
Doesn't exist.
No.
Every day there was something where a call came in or I needed to make a call or speak to a client at some point in time during the day or night.
How many uninterrupted, because I know you don't sleep much, how many uninterrupted sleeps did you get?
That was okay because I let a lot of people know where I was going.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple of nights where the phone rang, but it was mostly from people, not client related, but hockey related who didn't know where I was. And, there were a couple of nights where I answered the phone because I'm a very light sleeper when I am sleeping. And when the phone's going off, I'll kind of turn it over with one eye at 3:00 in the morning and see who it is. And a couple of times I had to answer the phone.
Wow. And I have to say, because you've always said your wife Stephanie's in the next room.
Yeah, she is.
She's hanging out watching Agent Provocateur in person. How does she deal with that? Because I know that as a partner, you got to be, there's a lot of patience, I think, that go into that.
An incredible amount of patience. And I am blessed to have a wife who understands what I do and completely supports me. I don't think I would be able in any way to do what I do. And I've been doing it now. This is my 30th year as an agent.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And literally the entire time, I've been with my wife 25 years of marriage and about 3.5 years before that when we met. So I was only in the business about 1.5 years when we met.
I was just going to ask. So she met you. You were very, very new. So those, from what you've told me, from some of the stories you've told me, those were tough years. You were doing a lot of driving back and forth and a lot of going to OHL teams and how did you, leaving a prosecution job, sell that to her as this is a viable career path?
I don't know, but I think she showed incredible belief in me, and she trusted me and she believed in me and she supported me. And starting off a new business, especially this business, is an incredible task. We met on an airplane together. We were sitting across from each other on an airplane, flying from Minneapolis to Saskatoon. She was working for a company called Sesame Street Live.
Okay.
And she was promoting those live shows. And she was promoting shows in Saskatoon in their Centennial Auditorium. And it was Labor Day weekend. It was this weekend.
So this is like your dating anniversary weekend?
The anniversary of when we met.
That's very cool.
Yeah. And I was going to the Saskatoon Blades training camp to see some clients and go to a preseason game. And that's where we met back in 1997.
Did you have a smooth opening line or?
Well, actually, she hit on me.
Oh, really?
And that's a story I'm always going to go with.
I'll have to look at the next room and see if she agrees with that.
Yeah.
She's saying no. She's saying no.
So what happened was, as we were nearing Saskatoon, they handed out customs forms on the plane. And I was dressed in a suit. I pulled out my pen and I started filling out my custom form. And just when I finished, she was sitting across the aisle, one row back. And she said, "Excuse me, can I borrow your pen?" So there were lots of people on the plane and there was a flight attendant going up and down the aisle. There was lots of people to ask for a pen.
But it was you.
But it was me. So for the last 28 plus years, anybody who's ever asked the story, she hit on me. That's my story.
That's your story?
And I am sticking with it.
She's shaking her head again, but she's laughing. Did she know, was it a Bruce Springsteen pen, by the way, that you passed back? And did she know early on how much you love him?
That weekend, it certainly came up in conversation.
It did. Okay. All right. That's amazing. And so I want to talk about this because I looked at your Puckpedia and they track not just the players, but the agents and how many contracts that you had to sign just this year alone. And I think we're at probably 15 to 20 and in terms of renewals and that sort of thing. And they all didn't happen in July. Some of them happened in, Marc-Andre Fleury extended a little bit earlier and that sort of thing. But you had a lot of work to do this summer. Do you feel very accomplished at this point that all of these guys are going in? Everybody from, say, Adam Juracek, who's at the beginning of his career signing his ELC in St. Louis, to, like I said, Marc-Andre Fleury, Jonathan Drouin, who had a renaissance year last year in Colorado, staying there. What are the big wins for you this year with the clients?
I never really sit back and think about that too much.
Well, that's why we do the show, though.
Okay. Yeah. So putting me on the spot like that, I would say David Perron
in Ottawa
is, I think, an amazing fit for the Ottawa Senators based on where they're at, where they're trending, new ownership, and coming to bring that leadership and character to the dressing room. I think that's going to be an amazing situation to keep an eye on. And
are you saying that because I'm a Leaf fan? He eats us alive.
I think he's going to continue to do that.
Okay, fair.
Sorry to give you the bad news. And I think it's also going to be a very emotional year for Marc-Andre Fleury. He has said publicly that this will be his last year. And I think that when he plays in Montreal, when he plays in Toronto, Pittsburgh, Vegas, those are going to be very special moments for him, his family, and me to some extent. I'm going to plan to be at a lot of those games to be there to witness it. Having been with him, as you well know, since he was 15, and all the ups and downs of his career, I have no doubt that he's a first ballot future Hall of Famer. The Cups, the Vezina, and just being known as maybe one of the greatest people to ever play the game, one of the most beloved teammates to ever play the game. It's going to be a very emotional time to go through the season with him. So that's something that I'm looking forward to. In every career, for every player, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And he's going to be turning 40 in December. It blows my mind.
How crazy is it? 25 years you've known him.
It's more than half his life, and not just him, but he's got an incredible wife and
great kids.
They and kids, but they met. They literally grew up down the street from each other, and they've known each other, Mark and his wife, since they were 7-8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great story that Vero, his wife, told me that they were around 14 and there was a high school dance, and Mark was too shy to ask her to be his date at 14, so he had his sister do it.
No,
Yeah.
that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, my favorite story, and you can go back and look this up in the Agent Provocateur archives, is we had Marc-Andre Fleury on. He was phenomenal, but my favorite thing was what he said about you. And I said, what was your first impression? And he's like, well, I remember thinking how this man's French is terrible. And I thought, as a native Montrealer, Allan, I mean, I would have expected it to be sharp, but he's got this ability, and not many people have this. He is, wherever he has gone, he's formed a special bond with the fans of that city. Obviously Pittsburgh, but you think about the effect that he had on Vegas, that initial run, that first magic season, and the seasons obviously after that, and obviously quick stop in Chicago, and then what he's done in Minnesota as well. People absolutely adore this guy everywhere he goes, and I think that's such a testament to. I think we don't, as media, as fans, we don't talk enough about how much that matters.
What always I remember is the flight from LA to Vegas is only 35, 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I would fly into Vegas a lot to see games, see him, see his family. And you get into Vegas, you jump into a cab. There is never a conversation that is more entertaining and colorful than a conversation with a Vegas cabbie. And you get into the taxi, and there were, where are you going, Mac? What hotel? And they would be talking about Marc-Andre Fleury. And then you get on the Strip, and the Statue of Liberty on the Strip is wearing a Fleury jersey.
Oh, wow.
Massive Fleury jersey. I mean, it was everywhere you went, that town that didn't have a professional sports team ever up until the Golden Knights. They were hockey crazy, and literally everyone in town knew and revered Marc-Andre Fleury. Going to a Vegas practice at the practice rink where people would line up and the entire facility would be full, almost 1,000 people to watch practice. Wow. And the lines of people that, after practice, I've stood there for literally 30, 40 minutes while Mark signed autographs and took selfies with everybody who was waiting for him. It's truly remarkable.
Well, and I'm sure they'll do, Jesse has been to a Vegas game in Vegas. I know you have. I never have, but Jesse said it's one of the best experiences he's ever been to. He said the in-game fan experience is incredible, and I'm sure when he's there, it will be unbelievable. Yeah. That'll be a very special night. Allan, I want to talk to you about a few things that happened this summer, because it's been, for an August, really interesting. Surprisingly. And, the first thing I think I want to talk about, and I want to bring this up because I know how passionate you are about it. Obviously, one of the big moves this summer was Yaroslav Askarov, one of the best goalie prospects in the game, going from Nashville to San Jose after he requested a trade. And the trade request became public. There are plenty of trade requests we never hear about, but this one becomes public. And it's in the wake of the UC Saros signing. He signed an 8-year extension. And, Barry Trotz has come out and said, well, him requesting the trade really put us at a disadvantage because there's been some criticism about what the return for Askarov is. And Askarov himself has taken a lot of heat in Nashville for requesting the trade. A lot of people saying, well, he's accomplished nothing at the NHL level, ignoring the fact that the guy was like 30-16 in the AHL with a .911 save percentage. He's really good. When you think about and talk about players like Askarov, Rutger McGorty, we'll bring back Cutter Gauthier, who we've previously talked about, seeing the writing on the wall and asking for a trade before they've really even made the NHL. What do you think about something like that? What kind of position does it put the player in? And you as an agent representing them, how do you navigate something like that?
Okay, so first off, I don't know Askarov personally. I don't know anything about that situation. But from 30,000 feet, I think it's safe to assume and speculate that he felt he was ready to play in the NHL. and felt that with a great established number one goalie just signing an 8-year deal like Soros, that there was no open door or avenue for him to pursue the career he wanted to have and wants to have in Nashville. So is a player in that situation supposed to just shut up, show up to the rink and play? Or does a player have any ability to control their career? And people can say he has a contract. All these players have contracts, or they've been drafted. They're property of a team. How dare you, when you haven't even established a career yet at the National Hockey League level, how dare you have the temerity to say you want to be moved to another organization? I see it, and you're going to be shocked to hear this, from a completely different perspective. Players only have one career. And sometimes you can't be a good guy. Sometimes you have to stand up and take a very make an unpopular decision for what's best for your career. You have to be selfish. You have to look out for yourself, right? Because again, you only have one career. So if you sit back now and say, where is Askarov or any goaltender in his position better off? In Nashville, behind an established number one goalie on a brand new 8-year contract, or with a rebuilding team like San Jose, where there is no quote unquote goalie of the future, where he now has the ability to step in, and now it's up to him.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, he's got to prove it now.
But he's got the opportunity now where he may not have had that opportunity where he was previously. So I hear the criticisms, and not just with him, but the three players that have recently stood up and said, I want to be moved. Maybe they don't like the trajectory of a team. It could be management. It could be coaches. It could be some of the interactions that take place after a player is drafted. It could be getting to know an organization and playing in the American League, where you decide, hey, this isn't for me. And I know this isn't for me. And I may be pissing off a lot of people in the process, but this is what I need to do for my career. I completely support it.
Yeah, it's one of those things too, where I think people were like, well, what kind of leverage does he really have? We had a lot of leverage. I mean, he played extraordinarily well.
People talk about this leverage all the time.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Yeah.
Okay. In my opinion, at the end of the day, a player should always have the right to decide where he wants to play. And yes, there's a CBA and there are rules, and you need a certain number of accrued seasons to become an unrestricted free agent or achieve the age of 27 before June 30th. We all know the rules.
Yep.
Right? The rules. But at the end of the day, nothing prevents a player from going in and saying, this situation does not work for me, and I'm requesting to be moved somewhere else, and I hope you accommodate me. And a lot of times those conversations happen quietly behind the scenes, and no one ever knows. And sometimes they leak out into the public domain, and people do find out about it for whatever reason. Sometimes the team may put it out there. Sometimes the agent and or the player may put it out there. However it gets out there, once it gets out, sure, more pressure is on the team by getting a return. And it's much harder for a team to get value in return when the world knows the player has demanded a trade. I've been in some situations where these conversations have gone on behind the scenes and nobody ever knew about them. A trade happens and people just see a trade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've been in other situations that have gotten louder and noisier. and
they spill out into the public domain, and the fans get involved.
Yes, and it takes a while to go from making the request to actually having the trade happen.
What do you say to a client that's taking a lot of heat online? Because, it used to be a time where I remember Larry Murphy in Toronto specifically. He signed here. It's a Hall of Fame defenseman, one of the highest scoring defensemen ever, signed here. And Toronto fans, for whatever reason at the time, decided he wasn't playing well, even though he was, and they wanted him out. And the team eventually capitulated and sent him to Detroit, where he won multiple cups, because that's what it's like to be a Leaf fan. What does an agent say to a player when media, fans, even the organization sometimes are going after them? How do you keep them on track, keep them focused, and keep them from not being hurt or having their confidence destroyed, especially at a young age?
I do my best to try to take as much heat as possible off the player and put it on myself.
Right.
So
you haven't been a stranger to that.
I will purposely say something intentionally, or tweet something, or put something out there into the public domain to make me look like the protagonist, to make me look like the bad guy. And I want to draw all the fire away from the player and put it on me. And the more people can get mad at me and train their sights on me and make me out to be the bad guy, the better it is for the player.
Right. Does that ever get under your skin?
The one thing that, we've known each other now for 3 years. The one thing, Adam, I don't think about for 1 second what people think about me, what they say about me. It is never a thought that goes into my head. All I think about is every day, how can I be the best agent I can be for my players?
And that's how you do it. Now, I want to ask you about this, because a friend of the show, Doug Armstrong, offer sheeted to Edmonton Oilers, Phil Broberg and Dylan Holloway midway through August. Again, it was a really eventful August. And as much as I love Doug and appreciated that he was on the show and really brought it, he told some great stories.
Great story.
A lot of it, Steve and I and Jesse were like, oh, do we have to go back to work? Really? Come on, Doug. But essentially, he gets 2 former first rounders that they're not just first rounders, they're developed hockey players, right? They're 3-4 years into their development with the Edmonton Oilers organization. And essentially, he gets them for a second and a couple thirds. And, and I think a prospect. Doug said he would offer sheet his own mother if it helped the Blues win, which I love. But as an agent, when you face something like a restricted free agent situation and another team calls and says, we'd like to offer sheet the player, how do you navigate something like that? Do you sit down and review the offer? Do you call the other team and let them know? How does that all work?
Offer sheets, as you well know, are incredibly rare. Okay. They don't happen every year. They don't happen every 5 years. And I've had conversations with GMs in the past about offer sheets, and the general reaction from GMs, what's the point? Right? It's an exercise in futility, because no matter what we do, the team is going to match. And that has been the pervasive feeling out there in the marketplace. What's the point of offer sheeting this guy if all I'm going to do is help the team sign their player because they match? Right. And many times the players are unsigned because they're far apart in negotiations. And one option of the team is always to trade the player because they can't come to an agreement. And there's a perception amongst the brotherhood of GMs, number one, that you don't do this to another GM. And number two, you're really getting into their business. Right.
Well, the Brian Burke, Kevin Lowe situation over Dustin Penner, they were going to fight, and like physically fight.
In a barn.
Yeah, in a barn. They were actually going to meet and fight in a barn.
Yeah, there was going to be a barn fight. And then you had the Carolina-Montreal
with Kotkaniemi.
dueling offer sheets. So one and then Aho.
And Aho, right.
Right. In retaliation, if you believe that. Some people do, some people don't. So I've had several conversations with GMs about this specific thing. There is a sweet spot in the $3 to $4 million AAV range. Now, the thresholds for the compensation, if a team does not match, is a floating there's floating thresholds tied to average league salary.
Okay.
And they get redone every year. So as the average league salary goes up, so do the thresholds. Okay. For a second round pick as compensation, for a third round pick as compensation, for 2 first round pick. Every year you get a new email with the new thresholds that apply for that particular year. And I've had conversations both last year and this year with GMs talking about the sweet spot in the $3-4 million range, where you realize you can get a $4 million player for a second round pick.
That's not bad.
That
better than deadline.
Right. But it used to be, half that. So by the time you got up to $4 million, you were talking about at least 1 first round pick, maybe 2. And of course, the top compensation is four consecutive first round picks, and they got to be your own picks. You saw with St. Louis, they had to make a trade before the offer sheets to get one of their native picks back
from the Penguins.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Because they had traded it away. It's not any third round pick as compensation. It has to be your own. So if you've traded it away previously, you got to go get it back.
Right.
Right. But there is that sweet spot. And I think that what this whole situation could possibly lead to in the next year and the year after is more of a proliferation of the use of offer sheets as a viable means of acquiring or trying to acquire a really good young player who's already in the league.
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about that because, you when you've got like a guy like Doug Armstrong has a ton of respect around the league. Yep. This is a veteran general manager. It seems as though when a veteran general manager does something, it's different than, like, say, a newer guy. So if it's a Kyle Davidson, if it's a Kyle Dubas isn't really new anymore, but newish compared to some of the tenured GMs in this league. It feels like that's possible because it's Doug, because it's a guy with that much experience that other GMs who are his age, of his era, might go, well, Doug's doing it. Maybe I should look at it.
Well, Doug's doing it. And do I have an obligation this offseason to do anything that I can within the rules to make my team better?
And you do.
Right. And if that player is a Group 2 restricted free agent, and that team, for whatever reason, might be capped out or on the verge of being capped out, and you have the space and you need the player, and you can take a shot, and it's only going to cost you a second or third round pick if you get the player, and it's not going to cost you anything if the team matches. Why aren't offer sheets flying the entire offseason?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
and why aren't they?
Yeah, you can literally offer sheet a player for, I believe it's under 1.5 million. I have to look at the thresholds. I haven't looked at them in a couple of weeks, but under 1.5 million, you can offer sheet a player and there's no compensation. You could literally sit there if you wanted to and write 8 or 9 offer sheets on players consecutively that you may really like. We're talking about young players coming out of entry level. If a team doesn't have the cap space, they're looking to sign a guy for, 800, 900, that 800 or 900 bump up to $1.4 million or $1.45 million or just under $1.5 million. You may get the player.
You might.
And it's not going to cost you anything.
Yeah. Well, and so, okay, let's pretend with my obviously athletic physique.
Yes.
That I am one of your clients and I'm in my early 20s and I'm an RFA. And an offer comes in from another team and we're sort of far apart with the team that I currently play for. That offer comes in, you call me. What's the first thing you say?
Well, here's the thing that you have to also keep in mind. There is a certain mentality that exists in the NHL culture that I despise.
What is it?
And that is, a player who signs an offer sheet is somehow being disloyal to his team, right? No, it's a business, and it is perfect. The rules of the game allow for offer sheets to be written and players to sign them. And there's a process and procedure in place for this to happen. What makes the player disloyal for signing an offer sheet? It's the old, players not wanting to market themselves to the fullest extent that they can, or to create a bit of a brand around them, being somewhat individualistic on social media, that frowned upon, like, hey, don't rise above the crowd. All of that is not the hockey culture. You're going against the culture, against the grain. Well, whether people realize it or not, we are moving very much more towards the mentality that exists in the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball, where players and their personalities are what sells the game.
Yes.
And there has been resistance to that from the NHL for 30 years. And if there's one reason why the NHL growth has been held back over the years, it's the spreading at the league's encouragement of that mentality, right?
Crest on the front, not name on the back.
It's all about the logo, right? And the NHL has believed for years in selling logos instead of helping to create star players with star player personalities that make the game more compelling for new fans to come in and watch games and become fans of, and devote hard-earned dollars into the game, whether it's game tickets or buying a jersey or buying a package to watch games on TV or streaming. There has been 30 years of restricted revenue growth in the NHL because of the way they've gone about trying to sell the game.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because if we rewind and we talk about the Marc-Andre Fleury effect in Vegas, right? The fans showed up because they were excited, but they kept coming, at least in my estimation, not because the Vegas had a cool logo, which it does, but because of how players like Marc-Andre Fleury made the fans feel. And you look at, your other client, Sean Dursey, and what happened when they got off the plane in Utah earlier this summer, and how they met the fans and how they really tried to ingratiate themselves with the community. It is the players that leave you with the feeling. Like when I met my favorite players growing up, I met Gary Roberts. He was face down on a table, completely naked, and the trainer had to put a towel over his butt because he was getting some back work done, and he shook my hand like this. I'll never forget it. But when I met those guys, it was how they made me feel. It wasn't the Toronto Maple Leaf logo and how that piece of fabric made me feel. Does that make sense?
Sure. And here's what's interesting about what you say. The owners of the Utah Hockey Club also own a team in the NBA, right? So I very much got the feeling when the Coyotes players got off that plane that something changed.
There was a snap, wasn't there?
There was.
Yeah.
Everything was going to be different now. And so far it has been. And I think that these owners are on the younger side of the owners that exist in the NHL. They're aggressive. They're progressive. They get it. And I think you're going to see many things occurring in Utah where that team will be one of the new leaders off the ice in how they market their players.
So that's interesting. And, I thought what was also interesting, there's a bit of a sidebar, but Phoenix Suns owner Matt Ishbia has been on record saying, I'm not interested in hockey. I'm here for the Suns. I'm here for the Suns. As soon as the Coyotes leave town and the previous ownership group gives up the rights to bring the Coyotes brand back, now all of a sudden he's saying, yeah, I might be interested.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that also seems to get it, where he, I think he was the guy that was sending out TV antennas for people just so they could watch Suns games for free, right? There seems to be this new injection of younger ownership. And do you think that, there are families that have been in this league? I mean, I'm thinking specifically of Chicago, but Philly was like that for a while, and Boston, they've been in this league for years and years and years. Can these new owners move the NHL Executive Council off of this to the point where it's going to make a real difference?
I really believe that's where it's going, and that these younger owners are going to be leading the league in initiatives to grow the game. I think it's coming because they get it. They're entrepreneurs. They've been very successful in their private businesses. It has become now a staple for billionaires to want to own professional sports teams. Mm-hmm. I think they look at the NHL and the exploding franchise values and where they are today. And I'm telling you right now, you can write it down. There'll be a record of this.
We'll put it out on social.
In the next 3 years, NHL franchise values will double.
Wow.
3 years. So Vegas expansion fee was $500 million. Seattle, $650 million. The NHL is going to expand. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. 2 more teams. The NHL will go to 34 teams. And when it does, those 2 expansion teams, I predict the franchise fee will be $1.5 billion. And that's more than double what Seattle was.
What's it cost to make a good arena? It doesn't even have to be the best one. Little people talk about Little Caesars or the one in Vegas as like the best, most technologically advanced hockey arenas in the sport right now. What does it cost to build one of those?
Price goes up every day.
Yeah.
But, we're talking about, around $800 million to $1 billion.
So you need to find somebody who's got $2.5 billion probably.
Yeah. And look, it's no secret. A lot of ownership groups have been able to tap into taxpayer money and get a facility partially funded, whether it's property tax abatement or creating arena districts mm-hmm. and charging usage fees, or city or district writing bonds.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of different ways that local communities or even different states have been able to contribute to the building of a facility, and hope that the area around the facility through mixed use office space, hotels, restaurants, bars, and so forth, bring in a ton of new business and contribute to the growth of a particular area. In certain cases, it does work too. You look at at Little Caesar specifically, what the Ilitch family was able to do with a bankrupt Detroit, right? And revitalize a good chunk of the downtown just by that way. I'm not totally, I won't get too political. I'm not totally sure how I feel about corporate socialism, but I do think there are times where it does make sense, and it seems like that could be very, very exciting. Still, it's a lot of money. That's crazy, and the owners who already own in the NHL must be thrilled about it. Well, look at LA. When I started in the business, the Kings played at the Great Western Forum in Inglewood, California. They built what became known as Staples Center.
Yep. In
downtown LA, in an area that was known for, drug dealers, prostitutes, motels for 1 hour, in a real bad, a dangerous area of downtown LA where nobody would think to go and have a dinner or to walk around.
You weren't putting a Wolfgang Pucks in there.
No, it was a dangerous area.
Yeah.
And when Staples Center first came up, across the street was nothing but a parking lot. I used to park there and walk across the street. And then came, if anybody's ever been to LA and been to a game in LA or even NBA or concerts or what have you, across the street, LA Live. And it's this incredible block or two of
it's restaurant,
JW Marriott, a Ritz-Carlton, great restaurants, bars, and the entire downtown area is now offices, condos, supermarkets. I mean, there was
nothing in downtown LA. Nothing.
And people will actually go downtown for dinner.
Yeah, which is wild.
Right. Like downtown is like hip and young people want to live downtown. Over the last 25 years, it's been an incredible transformation.
That's why I bring up Wolfgang Puck's, because when I was there, stayed at the Marriott that you're talking about to do the Canadian feed of the Grammys when I was an entertainment reporter, and I remember like our whole crew after our Grammy special went to Wolfgang Puck's, and it is interesting because there is that, or at least at the time there was that mix of, there was like an old leftover car wash, gas station / taco joint. They made great tacos. And then there's these gigantic buildings that are there and these huge restaurants, and it's all brand new and sparkly and very LA. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that works out in Arizona. Do you have and I'm just going to put you on the spot here, do you have a prediction on what markets are going to get a team? The next two?
I think if I had to pick two markets, I would go with Houston and Atlanta.
And then do you think the NHL has capacity to go beyond that?
Well, I think that Arizona is going to get figured out. I think that the NHL very much wants to go back into Phoenix, into the Phoenix area, but not until a building is built.
Right.
We're not going to go through that again.
No, please, no. Okay, I love that. Now, there was the last story I wanted to kind of hit on. There's a really interesting story out of Owen Sound, a player that I think a lot of people should pay attention to, Colby Barlow, who over 3 seasons with Owen Sound has never scored less than 30 goals, and his 30-goal year was his first year when he was, I think, 15 or 16 years old. Last year in 50 games, this guy had 40 goals. This is a 18th overall pick in the 2023 NHL draft. And I know he's not your client, but he's doing something, and I wanted to get your agent's opinion on this. He has decided and told the Owen Sound attack, I'm going to skip your training camp. I'm going to continue training with my personal trainer, and then I'm going to go to Winnipeg Jets camp and try to make the team. And obviously, Owen Sound has had limited success generally in the playoffs recently, but this guy's been lights out for them. What do you think about a move like that? And is that something that we're going to see more and more of as we get into the next 5 years?
I like it, and I think more players should do it.
Why do you like it?
Players generally are on great programs over the summer to prepare for camp. And then you go to a junior camp where you're on the ice a lot more. You're scrimmaging, and then you're playing preseason games. And then by the end of the junior camp, you go to NHL rookie camp. You're kind of tired.
Yeah.
Right? You've just been through a pretty brutal camp. You can't dog it, right? I talk to guys who are like, oh man, I just went through camp and now I'm off to St. Louis or I'm off to Chicago for rookie camp. I wish I had a couple of days off. But even worse, I've talked to junior teams who are like, he must come. He has to come. And I'm like, well, I don't want him playing in any preseason games with you, because if he gets hurt, right, it's going to destroy his opportunity, with rookie camp and big camp at the NHL level. And he's not going to play. He's not going to play. And invariably they push a player into a lineup. And I've had a number of situations over the last 25 years where top draft picks, getting ready to go to their first NHL camp, get hurt on the last shift of the last preseason game in junior and spend the whole time, at their NHL city instead of on the ice showing their best and getting that experience, which is a very important experience, sitting in the stands and sitting in the training room nursing an injury. It just makes no sense.
Yeah.
So, when NHL rookie camps are starting, stay home, keep training, keep getting stronger, keep preparing for camp, go to your NHL rookie camp. If you get asked to roll over into the big camp, great. If you get returned to junior by your NHL team at that time, that's when you go to junior.
Right.
Why would the junior teams object to that?
Well, the general manager, I think in this specific case, said it's disappointing, but it's something we have to work with or something like that.
What's disappointing about it? The player, the junior hockey is supposed to be all about development, and it's supposed to be helping the players prepare for a pro career. Does a player who's already played 3 years at junior really need to go to another junior camp as opposed to, hey, I'm going to be at peak physical condition. I'm going to be right where I need to be when I get to rookie camp at the NHL level.
Yeah. The very least, they come back with great experience, and they played with players better than what they're going to play with in the O. Do you think there's room for, or do you think it'll ever happen where we'll get away from this rule where players at 18, once they're drafted, have to go back to junior rather than going to the AHL? Are we going to do that? Is the NHL going to do that? Because it really seems non-beneficial to the player. It's an all or nothing element at a very young age.
I have had so many GMs complain to me about the rule, right? And the CHL has been adamant. If none of our players can go to the American League, but the question should be not your property rights over a player like the player is chattel. The question should be, where is the player best situated to develop into a National Hockey League player?
Yes.
The truth is, there are very few players who at 18 or 19 can thrive in the American Hockey League, but there are a group of guys who can. And it makes no sense to me that a player drafted from Europe who is not a CHL player when they are drafted can play in the American League at 18 or 19, but a player drafted from the CHL cannot.
Yes.
And ask the CHL team why, ask the CHL commissioner, why is that player not allowed to play in the American League if he's good enough to play there and that's the best place for him? Why?
Yeah.
Right. Well, we can't lose our players. He's going to be one of our best players in junior. Yeah, but he's not going to be challenged. He's going to get 55, 60 goals. He's going to get 130 points. He is the NHL team would put him in the American League and have their guys developing him. They've judged him ready for that. He signed his contract. He went to camp. He showed he's ready to play in the American League. Why can't he play there? Right? And they won't let him.
So then my question is, why doesn't the NHL, because I remember the last time they did this deal and there's a negotiation between the NHL and the CHL. Why doesn't the NHL just say, we're doing this, or what? Well, they have all the leverage.
They do. And the NHL pays huge money to the CHL in development fees.
I didn't know that.
To per player. Drafted and signed to financially compensate them and to benefit the development of all of junior hockey. And these development fees are huge.
So is that why? Is it about money? Is it about keeping the player and their development fee?
I don't think NHL teams are taking the position, well, if a player comes to the American Hockey League, we don't want to pay the development fee. I think the fees are important to maintain
solvency.
Yes. And for junior hockey to be able to all have, medical care and the right strength and conditioning coaches and, to support. I think that's all very important. What makes no sense. And again, I've talked to GMs who've expressed to me the frustration in, hey, we have a player we drafted 8th overall, and yeah, he's 18 years old, but he's on the bubble of being able to play in the NHL. They keep him for 10 games, 9 games, and return him to junior. Whereas if they had the option after 9 games to return him or assign him to the American Hockey League, they would do that because that's where he's ready to play. That's the level he should be playing at. And again, it's not for everybody, but why not have a rule where every team is allowed one exception?
That's a great idea.
Why not have a rule where every team can put one player in the American Hockey League who still has CHL eligibility and normally would have to go back to June? One player, you pick. But so it would be used judiciously. Nobody's going to convince me that would lead to the fall of the CHL, the fall of junior hockey. We're on the cusp of a very significant change happening with regard to NCAA eligibility.
Yep.
I mean, that's inevitable. It's coming. It's coming sooner than later. It could come this year. It could come next year. But those doors are opening. There's a couple of lawsuits that have been filed, antitrust lawsuits in the United States. That wall is coming down. So there's even less reason to say that, one or two of the best prospects in an organization cannot go play in the American Hockey League. It makes no sense.
I love it. Allan, thank you for being so generous with your time. I know you weren't in town to record a podcast. You're in town to go to a wedding, but it's been so great to have you here. And there's an airplane passing overhead. I'm not sure if that's going to show up on the microphone, but I want to say it's so great to see you. I'm so excited for season 3. Before we go, what's your next couple of weeks like before camp starts? What are you doing?
I just got to get back to LA.
You've been away all summer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And get back to hanging out with the dog.
Okay. Well, enjoy the wedding this weekend. And it is great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too. Great to see Jesse. Jesse's
there
as well.
He's giving the thumbs up. There he is. He's
absolutely. And, I'm excited for season 3. I wish today we all didn't have such heavy hearts, but it's great to see you and it's great to be back.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.